Okay, in this video, I'm going to show you how exactly to make an N8N workflow that creates an internal link map using just your XML sitemap. So in reality, this looks a little bit like this. What you do is you'd hit execute workflow. You'd put your sitemap into the input field, you'd hit submit, and then the system will crawl through the URLs in your sitemap. It will use the URL path from each URL to create a target keyword for that specific page. It will then create a spreadsheet that looks a little bit like this, and the output will give you the HTML that you can quite easily copy and paste into the target URL on the left-hand side, so on the source URL down here. Now, the best thing about this is it will use a keyword-rich anchor, as you can see up here, as the linking keyword for the page it's pointing to. So this means that we create hundreds, if not thousands, of internal links at scale, and they will be keyword-rich anchors as well. So this is like huge time saving for those that maybe have built hundreds of pages, haven't really thought too much about internal linking. We can now create the internal link map in a couple of minutes. Now, if you're not that interested in learning how I build this from scratch, so I literally go from an empty workflow to something that looks like this, that's absolutely fine. If you sign up to the link in the description, you'll be emailed a Notion board. Now, the Notion board essentially has a link to every single video that I've created on YouTube. It has the show notes for all those videos. If you click the create an internal link map up at the top, you can actually download this exact workflow, upload into your dedicated N8N instance. So if you're not interested in learning how to build it, that's absolutely fine. You don't have to watch me go through the absolute pain of getting it from start to finish and in a workable function. That's absolutely fine. Just upload it into your blank N8N instance and you'll be good to go. The one thing I will add is that I do walk through how to connect the Google Cloud Console API. So that means connecting sort of Google Sheets, Google Drive, you know, all the stuff that I think is quite useful to know. I'll sort of show how to extract the URLs, how to create that target URL or target keyword for each URL so that you can get an output that looks a little bit like this. Without further ado, I'm going to dive straight into it. Okay, so before diving straight into creating the automation, I always think it's really important that you visualize essentially how you want, or an idea of how you want this to work. So quite often I will come into a whiteboard and just map out what's in my head down on paper, just so that if I think there's going to be any complexities with this, we can try and address it before we start diving straight into the automation. So what do I want this to do? Well, I'm going to give it an XML sitemap, so I want it to crawl the sitemap. I then want it to pull the keyword using the URL string. So we're going to be looking at the session media URL list, and most of these URLs have the target keyword in the URL path, you know, just as a standard SEO best practice. I then want the output to add a single line sentence with that keyword in it in a column next to the place where we want that link to occur. And I want it to add up to 5 internal links per article. The output should then be a Google Sheet. So we're going to look to populate this with a Google Sheet. So my next step with this is I use GPT-5 to craft the prompt for Claude, and Claude will give us the JSON file for the N8N workflow. So if I take a screenshot of this, and it's really important that in the prompt to be as descriptive as possible, because then the models will start thinking about any sort of nuances that you may not have thought about. So I'm just going to write out this prompt now. Okay, so what have I added? So again, we're using GPT-5 to essentially create the prompt for Claude. Why do I do this? I've just found in general that Claude is more consistent, or gets a bit closer with their JSON file versus GPT-5. This may change. This is just how I work. And maybe in some use cases that isn't the case, but I'm going to stick to what I know for now. So I'm looking to create an internal link sheet using an XML sitemap. The workflow will be created in N8N. I've added a screenshot of the basic workflow. So, and then I've just added the very rough sort of step-by-step description of how that will work. So the user adds a link to their XML sitemap. The system crawls that XML sitemap, then uses the URL path as a target keyword for that page. The target keyword is wrapped into a sentence that naturally fits into the linking article. The target keyword should be the anchor text in the sentence. For each URL, there should be 5 internal links. And finally, the output should then be the initial URL in column A, and then columns B to F should be the HTML that will contain the sentence string and include the target keyword that should be the anchor. And of course, it's very important that it does provide an HTML, otherwise we won't be able to get the link actually within the output itself. And I want this to be delivered in a Google Sheet. Please then create the prompt, taking this into account that I will run in Claude to create the JSON workflow for N8N. So let's see what this provides us. Of course, the beauty with GPT-5 is that it will choose the best models to fit the requirements. A very small and subtle change, but one that I actually think has been super helpful. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. And for the sake of the video, I'm not going to play around with this too much. I'm going to almost just take it as absolute that this is as optimal as it can be. Okay, so we're going to jump into Claude. We're going to paste that as seen. We're going to use Opus 4.1 and we're going to see what Claude gives us. And I will just add that I think this is the beauty of these models, is whenever I see a lot of N8N sort of workflow videos, I still think there's a bit of a barrier there as to, well, how do I even get started with a workflow? And of course, typically you'll find like a webhook or some chat sort of input, but it's little known, I think, that you can use the models to just create the whole workflow and essentially just import the workflow. Now, the one caveat here is that when I import it, it's not going to be working. Obviously, I need to connect it to, a Google Sheet and using potentially sort of other APIs, and there might also be some nodes that it doesn't recognize, but that's fine. It will give us a bit of a foundation, which will save loads of time. So this output, it won't be the finished result by any stretch, but it will, or it should anyway, give us a really good starting base. Okay, cool. I think what I'm then going to do is download it as a JSON file. If you come into N8N in the top right hand corner here, import from file, and quite simply just need to find the file. Okay, cool. And as you will see, we have our sort of foundation workflow built for us. Now, you can already see straight away that we need to connect it to our Google sources. From an initial scope, this looks pretty spot on, but let's see how we get on. Okay, so let's get some of these Google sources set up. Okay, so if you haven't set up Google Drive with N8N before, then you need to connect it. Now, quick spoiler, Google is probably the most difficult API to navigate regardless of which product you have. Now, I've already got this set up here, but I'm going to briefly show you how you can get this set up, assuming that you haven't. So come into settings. So come into create new credentials. Now, the beauty with obviously these models is we can quite simply just screenshot the issue that we have. I would go into GPT-5 for this. And as stupid as this sounds, this is the easiest way to problem solve a lot of these solutions. I'm gonna follow this exactly. So I open Cloud Console at the top, select the project drop down, which is down here. Select new project, give it a name, enable the correct APIs. So my project, so let's just put internal link. Select project. Okay, now we need to select the products. This is where it can get a little bit fiddly. So APIs and library. And then we need to look for Google Drive. So Google Drive API. Enable Google Sheets API. We now need to do Google Sheets API. Enable, we've done both of that. We then need to go to the auth consent screen. Cool. Finish. Then need to go to credentials. Okay, and then we need to add the redirect URL. Now, if you come back into N8N, this is the URL, and this is how the two systems talk to each other, basically. It has given us it there, but I would always just use it from N8N just to make sure it's the right one. Save, so this gives you a client ID. So credentials have saved, that's fantastic. Close this, and this is now saved as Google Drive account 2. So that's set up. Let's do the okay, so we should be able to connect it with the email. This shows that it's all successful. And then we do the same with the other sheet as well. So this all looks okay. Okay, fantastic. Now we've got our workflow here. Okay, what I'm going to do is just, at the moment, there's no place for us to manually add our sitemap, which seems pretty obvious, right? So we need to figure out where we actually add this thing to kick it off. So in the so in config, node, we need to add a field string, field sitemap string, and then in the box paste your sitemap URL. Okay, cool. So I'm going to use the session media. Execute. So we can essentially execute each node by node. When you get that green message that pops up in the corner down there, that shows that there's been success, obviously. And we can see in the output on the right-hand side that it's successfully pulled the right XML. One thing to know about N8N is, as a general rule of thumb, the left side of the inputs coming from a previous node, the middle is essentially the brain of the node, and the right is the output. So essentially, we want it to give us like a green or a success message on the right hand side, because that means that that data can then be passed to the next node. And the best way to test all this is to go through each node and just press execute. Now, we can see on the left hand side that it's managed to pull correctly the post XML, but it's got a problem in the fetch, and this doesn't look right. So again, we're just going to troubleshoot and put this into GPT-5. And again, this is super common. As I said, the initial workflow is very much a skeleton, and you need to add the flesh to it, basically. So this is super normal to sort of go through and have all these errors and then resolve them step by step. Okay, cool. So, okay, yeah, in the config node fields, add activity string, name it exactly sitemap URL. That makes sense. You can see that it's looking for it. We've just called it sitemap, so it's not recognizing it. That looks a little bit better. Execute node should look like that. It does. Okay, so we're looking good here. Right. Let's go and re-execute. What I'm going to do is just pin that. So pinning means it saves that data. So as we go along, we can keep pinning so that if we get to the node right at the end, we want to test it, it doesn't need to go through every single node again to get to this point. It will just reference the last node because it's been pinned. So execute, and again, node executed successfully. And we can already see that this is pulling the URLs that are in that sitemap. So I can see that this has been successful. Again, to be fair, you don't need to pin every single one, just the last one. We're now going to execute this. And again, this can be a little bit laborious, so I'm going to go through and troubleshoot this on the way, referencing any key sort of learning points, so that I can expedite the video for you guys. Okay, cool. So just to catch up on this bit here, essentially the data that was being sent from fetch sitemap couldn't be read in the XML to JSON. So again, just use GPT-5 to help diagnose this, right? I'm not a developer by any stretch of the imagination. And it told me to add this line of code, and now the data can be read, so we can continue. What I'm going to do is just pin it to this point, and now we're extract URL. This is crazy, but I didn't think it'd be anything different, right? I've been recording for 45 minutes. I'm into node 4. You know, it almost doesn't matter how short or long these workflows are, there's always problems to solve. Now, the beauty of the AI is that we will always get to the end result, we'll always get to the solution, but you do have to be quite patient. Like, they're learners, right? They're still trying to figure out solutions. They will try a solution. It's up to us to test run it, and then we feedback whether it works or not. It's never going to get it spot on every time, is it? We're still getting no data, even though the node says success. There is nothing in the output, which means there's nothing to pass on, which means we can't proceed. Bizarre. But we're still not getting anything when the data is basically here. It's just tidying up so that it's in a format that can be more easily read. Okay, we're going to switch the always output data on. Let's see if we get anything into here which might help us diagnose it. No, bizarre. As I said, you have to have a hell of a lot of patience with this. Hell of a lot. I'm just going to drop this into here as well. Let's try and give it a bit more context again, even though it should have it all. I'm just going to give it the previous node again and what success looks like. Now, in theory, it can actually see that in the other node, in the extract URLs node, but let's just change up how we're going to give it. Let's give it more tools to try and diagnose the issue with and see what magic it can work. That's all we can do at this point. Aren't I so kind to you that future me is giving you this full workflow issue free, right? Surely that's worth at least a subscribe at the minimum. Can't believe I made lunch plans. Silly me for thinking I would have this done within an hour or so, and it's more likely going to be like 3. But hey, it's worth it. I learned something from this when I do this, which is going to help me and my team, subsequently our clients. So it's not all in vain, I promise. And of course I'm helping out you guys, which is also very important. Okay, we've got there, and what I ended up doing was actually deleting the node completely and then going into Claude and basically saying, I want to extract the URLs from the previous input, give me the JavaScript to do it. So basically started from the beginning on that node, and it looks like it's done it. So we're getting there. Okay, build the link map. Let's go into execute. Not define, actually what I'm going to do is just pin this. Back into GPT, I'm actually just going to give it context that I resolved it. I'm also just going to give it a bit of context as to where it sits in the workflow as well. Amazing. So we've got a fix from GPT-5, and this has actually done it first time. So we've got the source URL. It's then given us an HTML snippet with the link. It looks like it's given us, okay, so it's given us all 5 columns. So we can already see that this is starting to come together, which is really, really great. So we've got the map, or we've essentially got the sheet drafted out here. Now, if you really wanted to, you could probably copy and paste this directly into Google Sheets, which is awesome. So we've got our link map looking pretty good. Now, this next section will be the process of taking it and putting it into a Google Sheet. Oh, it's been a bit of graft to get here. I think I've spent just over an hour to get to this point. As I mentioned, you can directly download this workflow by clicking the link in the description and navigating to the Notion board. So you do not have to go through all this headache, but I want to show you the process of how these things get built, because I also think there's value in the education side of it as well. So let's go to the next step. And one thing that I will check on the link map is just making sure that we've got anchors that look optimized. So related reading on MSP marketing strategy is available here, link MSP marketing strategy. So that looks pretty spot on. The logic has worked, which is fantastic. So let's get this into a Google Sheet now. I'll be super honest with you as well, just while this model is thinking, that if I run into too many issues here, I might try and shortcut the end of this, because you know, the process of getting it into a sheet shouldn't take as many nodes as it looks like. So I'll see what it's trying to do. If it's a case of really trying to fine tune the headers and things, you know, I'm not super precious about that at this point. So bear with me on this one. I might actually shorten the workflow. Fun and games of this, that I obviously didn't charge my camera before jumping on this, and I'm super low on battery. So that gives me another incentive to get a move on with this. Of course, we're creating a new, on the GPT-5 recommendation, we're creating a Google Sheets node. We're going to create a spreadsheet title. This looks a little bit more familiar, if I'm honest with you, so I've got a bit more faith with this. And of course, as I say that, we have the same 0 output as we've had with the last node. I feel we are so close to the end here, and of course I'm working against my battery life, so I'm desperately hoping I can get all this done and record it before it dies on me. Okay, what I'm actually going to do is, again, I told you this process can take you in many different directions. Cool. Okay, so we've changed this around a little bit, and we're going to try and simplify it. We're going straight to create a spreadsheet. As we can see, all the data we want on the left-hand side, the create spreadsheet is spitting out metadata instead of the actual row data. So we're so close, we're incredibly close. And if I come into table on the left-hand side, you can see all of the data is here. This is exactly what we're looking for. The small issue we're having is just getting it into the spreadsheet. So what we've done is we've come into ChatGPT, and it's telling us rather to create an append row node, which essentially means that we can map fields directly into a spreadsheet. Okay, I kind of feel like I have got to the point where I've gone around in circles. We have our data here from the build link map node, but we're struggling to get this data into the spreadsheet node. So sometimes a little bit of a Hail Mary with N8N is to essentially remove the last 2 nodes. And I never fully delete, I just kind of part them to the side here. And then what I do is I almost treat it fresh. So what I'm going to do is go into Claude with this prompt, and I'm essentially just going to ask it to tell me how to put this data that we're getting from the output in the build link map into a Google sheet. Okay, cool. So what I've done is I've created that new sheet. I've then executed the node as before. We've still got the metadata on the right hand side, but what I've now done, as per N8N here, where it's essentially told me to go through the same steps. So create a Google Sheet node and append it. and then to map the columns. So what I've essentially gone and done is I've opened up the sheet on the right hand side here. So this is the Google Sheet that the system has created, and then I've just added the column headers up here and then refreshed the map column mode. So now I've got these options to put it in. So we've got some progress here. And then if I jump back into Claude, I've got the JSON file to copy directly across. So let's see if this works. There's an important lesson here, right? N8N takes a lot of graft. It's a lot of patience, a lot of problem resolving. You know, you cannot one-shot prompt all this stuff. You do need to figure it out. But the beauty is that answers are always there to be found. You know, you don't really need to have a developer skill set to try and figure this out. And that's why I love it. I'm incredibly patient, I'm incredibly persistent, so I will keep working at this to get to a solution basically, and that's the critical thing with this, right? Cool. Okay, node selected. Okay, and there we have it. We've now got a spreadsheet that is populated with our source URL in column A. We've then got 5 additional internal links to add to that source URL. What the workflow has given us, as we've asked for, is it's given us a sentence that includes the internal link. It's written in the HTML, so we can just copy and paste it. And the anchor text for the internal link is the keyword for the linking URL. So all we need to do now is add this directly into the URL that's listed on the left-hand side. And there we have it. The internal links have been added. It's taken a bit of graft. As I explained, it will always do with N8N, and as you can see, like, just take a look at all these nodes that I'd originally sort of planned to use. We don't need any of these now. Okay, the final piece of this puzzle is ironically the start of the workflow. So what we've got at the moment is that we can manually add in our XML sitemap, but it's not the most practical thing in the world. So what we need to do is create a trigger to start this. So in this instance, what I'm going to do is actually remove the config. I'm then going to add a form. The form is essentially there so that we can add in our XML sitemap, and that also means that we can put the link live. So let's call this, or let's say input sitemap. We're then going to add a field that just says sitemap URL. We're going to have text here, and then the placeholder text is going to be sitemap URL up at the top here, a little bit like this. We then need to connect it to our fetch sitemap. What I'm going to do is just execute this, and then this brings up a test event, so a form that looks a little bit like this, no frills, as you can see. And then what I'm going to do is just add in the. Okay, I'm actually quite mindful you might not be able to see on the screen. So essentially, it's just popped up with a form, and I'm just putting in my post sitemap from social media, and you can see that this is executing. It's pulled the sitemap here. If we now go to fetch sitemap, we can execute this step, and we can see that the workflow is now started to run between those nodes. So a very important part of the process is obviously how to trigger the workflow right at the start. So create the form. There's a number of different form types. You can start with this. What I'm now going to do is just get rid of this, and I'm now going to download this and provide it in the Notion board that you can get access to if you subscribe to the link in the comments. Now there's probably a little bit more we can do. I can connect it to WordPress so this gets added automatically. For the sake of the video, I'm going to keep it short and sweet and leave it there. Well, actually, in typical YouTube fashion, the last thing I did was leave it there, and I added 2 additional nodes to make things a little bit easier for you. So the first one was an edit fields node. This means that I can automatically map the headers from the build link map node into a spreadsheet automatically. And the final node is a Slack integration node, which means that a notification fires into my Slack when the spreadsheet is created. Also amended the append row node so that the field dropdown was map automatically instead of map manually. If you sign up to the link in the description and download the JSON file, you will receive the updated workflow that is fully end-to-end, no manual mapping. Thank you. Enjoy. Hopefully you got some value out of this, and as I've mentioned, it takes real graft to get N8N to work, but the solutions are always there for us with the power of AI and everything. You know, I created this whole system by asking ChatGPT essentially what I wanted to create. We've then turned that into a prompt for Claude. That Claude has then created a JSON file for us that's given us, as I mentioned at the start, like a very foundational level workflow that we tweak and amend as we go along. And in many cases, what we have to do is when we feel like we've got 85% of the way, let's just almost start from that 85% to get the end done, you know, and it is a lot of refining. So if you've taken any value from that, then please feel free to subscribe to the channel. I'm going to try and create as many of these workflows as I can for you guys in the next few months or so. So if you've also got some suggestions of things you'd like to see, please feel free to add them in the comments. Thank you.